So today we're running some T&G. First thing we want to do is check the walls, check the studs. If you're running it on the ceiling, check the rafters. So we're going to take a straight edge. We'll be able to check for any low spots or any high studs. Then we'll take either some shims to shim out the low studs or a power planer, and we can plane down all the high studs. So I've got a stud that's a little high, and I'm just going to plane it down a little bit with the power planer. Make sure there's no screws, nails, staples, or anything like that before you start planing. Make sure to keep an eye out for things like this little screw sticking out. Sometimes there's nails and whatnot. So after I get everything planed down and shimmed out to where I like it, I like to use a 360 laser, and I'll shoot a control point all the way around a room. And I'll make sure everything is level and is going to line up to where I need it to, because after that I start figuring out layout. And layout is going to include everything from where it's going to hit along the ceiling, beams, tops of windows, tops of doors, how tall the base is going to be, because I don't want to end up with a tiny little strip either at the roof line or right above the base. I'm going to get as full of a board as I can. Once I figured out the layout, I actually like to put little blocks on the bottom where I'm going to start. I pull down from my control point and I get an even number all the way around the room, so that way everything's level. And then I'll put a block, and I can just set that first piece on there without having to try and hold it up, line it up, anything like that. So once I have the piece where I like it, I'm going to nail it through the tongue at a downward angle. I don't want to see the tops of the nail. Like you can see right there, that nail that's sticking out through the top, that means I was too flat, and the next piece is not going to set flat on there. We're going to have to knock that nail down. Safety first. So on this one I've got outlets to cut out, and on this house I've decided to move the boxes a little bit so that way they end up in the center of the next board. So what I did is I cut the board, kind of put it in place, marked on the board where the outlet is, and then I'm just going to center up a hole right on the board, and then I will put the outlet right where that hole is. So when I'm cutting out the outlets, I like to use a drill bit to punch a couple holes in the corners, being careful not to blow out the face of the material, because that's your finished side. And then I cut the rest of the hole out using a jigsaw. So one thing that'll make installing this board easier is putting a bit of a bevel on the back side of this board here, because this is going to have to tip in around the outlets. So cutting this edge out will eliminate you having to fight it. So now that I'm a few rows up, I'm checking my control point, and I can see from that side to this side and the center, this right side is about 3/16 higher, and that shows in this gap right here. So this board's got a little bit of a whip in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this board to go down. Sometimes you can take a nail set, you can drive it in, and you can push down on the board to get it to bend. But with this being cypress, this tongue is pretty soft, and I've got to take 3/16 out of just this right side, so that's not going to work the best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a block up here, get a spreader clamp, and spread this down, and that should push it down and get me what I need. It's exactly what I need. So if you don't have a laser line or a control point like I do to go off of, a lot of times I'll either use the longest level I have or a straight line and I'll run from one side to the other, and that will at least tell me if I've got a dip or a hump in it, and the level will tell me if I'm running nice and level. So I'm using my straight line. I like to put it right on the edge, and that will tell me if I'm high or low. And this one seems to be right on the edge all the way down, so that tells me I am good. So with this T&G being Cypress, it's pretty soft, so if you start hitting on the tongue side, like I had to get this piece locked in, you can damage that tongue, and it makes it very difficult to get the next piece in. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a beater block, I'll use part of the T&G with the groove, so that way I can set it right on there. I can hit it pretty hard without damaging the tongue. If you do damage the tongue, that's not that big of a deal. If it's flared out, kind of like this here is, you can just take a nice sharp chisel, get rid of that part that's flared out, and you're good to go. So I'm using my control line to make sure that I'm on the same plane throughout this room and make sure I'm even on both sides of the door, because it's real easy to get higher or lower on one side of the door. So all I'm doing is taking a measurement. I got 21 7/16. I got 21.5. So this side can go up a 16th. So this next row I'll fudge up a 32nd. Row above that I'll go another 32nd. That'll get me back on track. So that way by the time I get to the top of the door, everything lines up, because this piece has to carry all the way through. So there's a couple ways to doing an outside corner. You can either put it together and just nail through the corner, or you can biscuit, put a couple biscuits in here, and that will line up the corners. Usually gets it pretty good every time. It really depends on what kind of quality you're going for. Alright, so I've got 2 biscuit slots. I'm using number 10 biscuits, so that way I don't poke through the face of it. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to glue up this corner. I'm using TB3 since it's stained. Get my biscuits nice and glued up. See how that fits. So I like to use Collins clamps. Helps hold things together. And I will take a brad nailer and just get it right through the corners. Hit it with 15 and clean up the glue. So when I'm doing an outside corner like this, I have cabinets going up on this wall, so I need to make sure that this corner is plumb on this side. So what I've done is I've set up my laser, so all I have to do is bring this piece out till it hits my line. Now I know it's nice and straight. You can also use a level to do the same thing. So something else that's also very helpful is when you're doing outside corners and even sometimes inside corners, use the same piece for both sides, because not only does it look cool, but you're ensuring that you have the same height piece on both sides. If you use different pieces, they can vary 1/16 or more. And when you do that, you're trying to fight each side, and one side will start growing faster than the other. So if you use the same piece for both sides, that eliminates that problem. So if you guys notice, the last couple feet here, I ripped the back side of this groove off. That's because if you look up here, I have a beam. Now the T&G has to be tight against this beam, so that means I can't come in, drop the piece down onto the tongue. So I ripped the back side of the groove off so it'll slide in from the front, and the T&G will be nice and tight against the beam. So this is another good example of having to rip the back side of the groove off to get your piece to fit. So as you can see, I've ripped the back side of the groove, pre-made the corner, and now it just slides right in there. So when you're running longer lengths of T&G, you have to have butt joints in there, but remember you want a random pattern. You don't want joints to line up. That causes a weak joint and it looks terrible. As a general rule of thumb, I go either 2 joists or studs away from the last joint. As you can see here, I've got a joint here, and then I've got one over there. Those are 2 joists away from each other. They look better and stronger, and that's the right way to do it. So when we're doing butt joints with the T&G, biscuits are the way to go. It's quick, easy, and it works well. I like to get as many biscuits and as big of biscuits as I can in here, because if I was to use, say, one 20 biscuit in the center, these ends might curl out, or if I just had small ones on this end, the center might bow, and I want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So when you're putting them together, make sure to use plenty of glue and get as big of biscuits and as many as you can in there. So one of the big advantages of planing down or shimming out your studs before you start is if you have anything like beams or columns going on the wall, cabinets too, you're going to have a hard time fighting the T&G if it's wavy, if it goes in and out. As you notice in here, we've got beams, and it was a lot easier for us to get these installed, and we didn't have to fight too much, a little bit, but not much, to get a nice look.